So it's a Jewish tradition that on Friday we prepare the food that we want to eat on Shabbat. This originates in the book of Exodus. When God was giving the manna to the Jewish people, he said, this that you want to eat on Shabbat, you want to cook before Shabbat. If you want to bake, you bake before Shabbat. One of the most traditional Jewish dishes that is eaten on Shabbat day is a stew which is called Cholent. I will explain what that is and why that is as we go along. But first, I would like to share with you a little bit of my expertise of how we make cholent in the traditional way. So you will see here, we have a plate of chopped onions, which I will go ahead and proceed and put it into this pot right here. And then we have a bit of vegetable oil, in this case it's canola oil, and we add a little bit of canola oil into the pot and have the fire and flame on medium heat and let it saute for a little while. After that, we're going to put some kolachol meat. This is cholent meat. You can use beef stew, and that becomes the meat that we use, but we will do that when the onions are ready. So, why cholent? So there are several reasons. Number one, the sages have said, based on the book of Isaiah, that on Shabbat we have to have the light. There's spiritual delight, there's material delight, there's physical delight, and the physical delight includes good, tasty, hot food. And cholent was a natural dish that you can actually put into an oven or on a flame, on a low flame, and let it simmer for a long period of time until it is ready to be eaten on Shabbat. In fact, in some communities, especially in Jerusalem, what they do is they actually have a communal oven, a communal stove, and everybody brings it from home, and then they pick it up because they have an Eruv and they can carry it. Another thing that we have to remember is that there were the Sadducees. The Sadducees were a group of Jews that rejected rabbinic teachings. And they said that this that it says in the Torah, that you shall not light a fire on Shabbat, means that you cannot have a fire lit at all on Shabbat. And in order to debunk their misinterpretation of the Torah, what the rabbis instituted is, number one, that Friday night before Shabbat, 18 minutes before sunset, we light the Shabbat candles, and we try to eat by the candlelight, and it burns into Shabbat. And the second thing is to leave a small flame on, but to cover it in order to remind us not to adjust the flame and let the food simmer. So thus, with that, we have the creation of cholent. But what kind of stew can really last? And it's been perfected over the years. So again, we start with some onions that we are now sauteing in the pot. And as it sautés and it comes to point of simmering, we put in a piece of meat. Now this meat is going to become tender after sitting overnight in this pot. Now, the main part of the stew in the Ashkenazi community is, of course, potatoes, which we have already peeled, and I will be cutting them in momentarily, and also beans. Most people use kidney beans. Some people buy a premix, which you can get at Gleiberman's, which is called a cholent mix, and it actually has a variety of beans. I usually soak it a few hours before for two reasons. Number one, to clean it, and number two, to soften it up. So then when it cooks, it really can absorb the flavor and it can absorb the liquid that's there. We also use pearl barley that we inspect, we check to make sure that there's nothing foreign in it. So those are the key ingredients that give the essence of the cholent. Then we will talk about the spices as we go along. So we're just waiting for this cholent to simmer out a little bit. Now, today I'm making a small only because, unfortunately, we're in a time right now when we have to practice social distancing and families are not coming together. So for that reason, we're having it as a small cholent. And of course, adhering to the strict kosher laws, we have a separate section for meat. And this is a meat pot. We don't mix milk and meat. And this is a designated cholent pot in our home. So what I'm going to do next, while I'm waiting for the onions and meat to get a little warm and to saute, is to cut these Yukon potatoes in half, because by cutting them they can also absorb more flavor. It's also more bite size. Some point I turn the meat over. This is the frosted meat that I've taken out and let the frost in the fridge overnight. In another few minutes we will begin to put the ingredients into it. Now you're wondering, why am I the one that's making cholent in the house? Actually, I have to tell you, my wife is the one that taught me how to make cholent some 36, 37 years ago, and it's her secret recipe that I've been using. But it was at the time that she was assuming the position of being the day school director, and it was really occupying most of her day. And we realized that on a winter Friday, when school is open till 3 o'clock, by the time she comes home, there is not enough time to cook. So I said to her that since your work is so important in educating the children, I will come back from the office and I will cook if you teach me how to cook. So the first dish that she taught me how to cook was this fantastic, phenomenal cholent. So that is how I got to make the cholent, and over the years, I've been making the cholent every Friday, almost without exception. I don't remember exactly how many years, but I can say comfortably that it's at least 37 years, if not 38 years of making cholent. So much so that if it's a Friday that I'm not making cholent, I feel like there's something missing in my prep for Shabbat. So that is how it came to be. Then I started to prepare other Shabbat dishes. The deal still is that when it comes for holidays, she does the cooking, as she's an excellent chef. So it's just for Friday that I do the cooking and help prepare for the Shabbat meal. So I think we are about ready to put in the other ingredients. So following the meat that is sauteing, the next thing that we do is put in these potatoes and let them saute for a while. Then we drain the beans, make sure all the water is out. And you can see the beans right now. That goes into the pot. The next item that goes in is the pearl barley. Now usually I use a cup of barley. It depends how thick you want the cholent. Some people put in more potatoes, some people put in more beans or barley. I try to have it equal. Once all of these items are in, then we begin to season it. We start with salt, not too much, but also not too little, because it gives it a balance. The second item is garlic, which is quite important. for the taste. We put a little sprinkle, very little, but a little sprinkle of pepper. And then paprika. The best one that I like is sweet paprika or regular paprika, but don't do the hot paprika. But paprika is an excellent addition to bring out the flavor of this cholent, and it also adds color. And here we have brown sugar. Brown sugar is important. It balances it out with the salt. There's one more item. And that is good old ketchup. Some people use tomato sauce. I've just found that ketchup is a real good addition. And I would say I put in, depending on the size of the cholent, just a few tablespoons. The reason I'm not measuring anything is, again, because I've been doing it for such a long time. So I just do it by sort of touch. Now, after all the ingredients is in, the next thing we do is put in water. Now, instead of using a measuring cup, I like to use the top cover. I rinse it out. I put in some cold water. Add a little more. Make sure it covers it mostly, but not entirely. And again, it depends how many beans. You don't want it to be too soupy, and then I stir it. And then what I do is I try to bring it to a boil. And once it comes to a boil, then I lower the flame entirely, and I will cover the pot and let it simmer for a good few hours, then shut it off. And before Shabbat, we put up the blech, which covers the oven, the stove top, and then we put on the cholent. Well, thank you very much for joining us. I hope you have a good Shabbat. Stay healthy, stay safe, and if you have any questions, you can contact me for sure.